Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, George Takei, James Doohan, Walter Koenig, Nichelle Nichols, David Warner, Lawrence Luckinbill, yeah, I got that right, and Charles Cooper, and forgive me, Lawrence, if I said your name wrong, and directed by William Shatner. Now, let's get into this movie, shall we? Because I don't remember much except seeing it one time, but let's get into it. In a deserty planet, a writer approaches a desert man, and the writer, who happens to be a Vulcan, asks the desert man to accompany him on an epic journey, which was a dreadful opening scene, as he says they need a starship. Then we go back to the score that feels like Star Trek to me from the first film. Meanwhile, in Yosemite, Captain Kirk, returned by William Shatner, Dr. McCoy, returned by DeForest Kelley, and Spock, returned by Leonard Nimoy, take their shore leave in the park while Kirk is climbing the mountain in Yosemite and falls eventually, and Spock saves his life and catches him before impact. And my problem is Shatner trying to make himself look good. And that's a bad thing when you're not a Shatner fan like I am not. And Shatner directing this movie is a mistake. It turns out the shore leave is canceled while Kirk and Spock and McCoy later on at night serves up homemade beans, which, ew, I'm not a fan of beans. And they talk about how Kirk will die alone, which makes me think something's going to happen to him by the end of the movie. And next thing you know, they sing "Row, row, row your boat" as they educate Spock about what the words mean as they have a campfire. And that scene was very corny, as this movie is all over the place at this point. In a remote sector of outer space, the ship's commander, Captain Claw, sounds like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget for some reason, but moving on, fires blasters and destroys the Earth's Gemini satellite, and they figure out the Klingons are going to the desert planet. Meanwhile, the Spock tells a story about a Vulcan student of his named Sybok, who was the Vulcan writer in the first scene, and the Enterprise arrives that he destroys into the deserty planet. And this movie is a mess, and Uhura, returned by Nichelle Nichols, is a bait to get into Paradise City, and it makes absolutely no sense. Like, what the hell is this movie about? I mean, really? Kirk and the Enterprise get captured by Sybok, and Spock asks Sybok to surrender, and Sybok refuses while the Klingons attack approaches the Enterprise, and so does Kirk and other crew members with Sybok, and they get in the Enterprise, and Kirk and Spock attacks Sybok. Kirk more than Spock, and Spock doesn't shoot Sybok, and requests a private moment with Sulu, returned by George Takei, and Uhura, and Spock's reasons for not shooting Sybok made no sense. Scotty, returned by James Doohan, breaks Kirk, Spock, and McCoy out of imprisonment, and bumps his head and is unconscious as Spock takes Kirk and McCoy to the observation deck and sends a message, but are found by Sybok himself. And these scenes are poorly directed by Shatner, and it screwed my head up. This plot did. I can't stand how much it screwed up my head. The Enterprise at the Great Barrier, as Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Sybok take a shuttle down on the planet's surface, and the Great Barrier looks like the Grand Canyon, but purpley painted, as the crew is left behind to see until a Klingon ship appears, as God is angered the planet out of the blue, shoots Kirk with an energy bolt with his eyeballs, wounding but not killing him. Spock demands an answer to Kirk's question and is also hit by an energy bolt. And the planet God's image looks so freaking horrible. It's like an image out of a horror movie. And that's when the movie loses me. Then they fired 2 torpedoes at the planet as Sybok is killed in the blast. Spock and McCoy get beamed up until the Klingons start to attack. the Enterprise unless Kirk and his crew surrenders to him. And Kirk comes on the Klingon ship, and they don't want this war. And Spock is the new gunner at the Klingon ship. They celebrate humans and Klingons getting along again. And the movie ends with on Yosemite once again sitting around a campfire singing "Row, row, row your boat," and the climax is sloppy. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 2.6 out of 10. The movie suffered with William Shatner as director, as it hurts my brain half to death. The movie is sloppy, preposterous, and it made no sense because it was all over the place. And thank God Shatner will never direct another Star Trek movie ever again. So I would like to thank you guys for joining me, and next week I will be back with Star Trek 6. And until next time, beam me up, Mr. Scott.